Hi, this is Keith. Welcome to Money Clips. I just wanted to talk to you today a little bit about the importance of having an emergency fund and also maybe fun with emergency funds if you have a certain mindset. So stay tuned. So why even bother with having an emergency fund in the first place? Well, there's a lot of common logic to that. You've probably heard a lot about it, which is to set aside some money for a rainy day and for any surprises that life throws at you, which are probably constant, especially during COVID. As a matter of fact, most people who got through COVID saw their savings diminish at a very rapid rate. CNBC, for example, says that over half of Americans, I believe it's 56%, if I'm not mistaken, can't cover $1,000 emergency, which is the minimum recommended emergency fund. There's been talk about, is $1,000 really enough of an initial goal for an emergency fund? And I want to talk about that for a second. And that issue is simply this, that the emergency fund, yes, you need more than $1,000. I don't care who you are, at least over here in the U.S. The issue at hand, though, is that $1,000 is really a psychological barrier. So if you can't really save and set aside $1,000 in some sort of liquid vehicle, then you really need to do some self-examination and find out what's really the core of the problems that you're dealing with right now, and find a way to make it happen where you and yours can keep their hands off of it. Sometimes married couples, for example, one person's putting the money away, but then the other says, oh, well, I really needed the money. We needed it for whatever, but it genuinely wasn't an emergency. Something was on sale or whatever. And that's really a bad way to go. As a matter of fact, if you have a way to set it aside so that both of you are required in order to access the money, that can be helpful, a helpful mechanism. But it can also be problematic because it can create arguments in a family. Setting that aside, though, for us people who don't have that complication, I'd say $1,000 is a very reasonable and easy goal to establish. And what do I mean when I say liquid? I'm talking about either cash on hand, maybe in a safe somewhere, home safe, a savings account, potential, or preferably not at your main bank. That way, you maybe have to go down to the branch to get it. Credit unions are great for this. And as a matter of fact, speaking of credit unions, I was just cruising around. Today is 15th of December that I'm recording this, of 22. And I'm seeing several savings accounts that are at or near 4%. I'll put a link in the description below. I don't get any money from that. I'm not advertising for anybody. But the two top ones are American First Credit Union and Blue Federal Credit Union. So they're both at 4% right now, and it could be a very nice way to set your money aside. I see that Blue has only a $1 requirement for opening up the account. It is a digital bank, or a virtual bank, so you are going to not have the access to a physical branch. So with that in mind, you can transfer money in and out, but it's probably going to take 1 to 3 days to settle. And those are business days, so if you send it out on Friday, you probably won't get access to your money until Tuesday, Wednesday. So you have to be prepared for that. Some banks are giving less, but I believe that the most important thing is the immediacy of the accessibility. So maybe you sacrifice a point or so in interest, but you can get the money same day or within 24 hours or one business day if you need to. So that's a very important aspect to having a true emergency fund. So moving on to how much do you really need? How much are you supposed to have? And there is a fair amount of wisdom on that. Anything from 3 to 6 months. I believe Susie Orman mentioned 8 months, and she, within the last few years, revised that up to 9. I have heard talk of people saying, oh yeah, keep up to a year if you want to, which is fine. And these are a year of expenses, but just wait a sec, because if you get beyond that, then you're leaving cash sitting around. And then because of inflation, you tend to be losing money. So you definitely don't want to keep more than a year in liquid cash available at any one time. going back to how many months you need, of course, whether it's 3, 6, 5, whatever you happen to consider as being appropriate in your particular situation, keep in mind that it's not necessarily your net or gross income that we're talking about. We're talking about your monthly spending. That is to keep the lights on, keep the roof over your head, staying in your rental, whatever it happens to be, so that those basic fixed costs plus your groceries and other items are provided for while you search for a replacement income. That could be a job, it could be maybe doing something online, you could be building a business, but you definitely need that buffer cash. If you're looking to set aside that buffer cash, or if you even have it, something that may influence your decision on how many months worth you keep is if you're, say, a married couple and you're in a two-earner household, and you are, one person's got a steady job, the other one's got a steady job. If one person actually loses their employment, then they're potentially going to have unemployment benefits. They're also going to be able to supplement that with their portion of the emergency fund while the other person continues to work. And everybody hopefully tightens their belts a little bit. The good news on that is really that you may not need more than 3 months in that particular case. However, more is better up to a point. As we talked about, there are limits. Too much liquid cash is not always good. The other aspect of this is if you're a single earner household and maybe there's one or more of you in the house, maybe you're by yourself, that unemployment, they have it for 6 months for a reason. That sometimes it takes a little while to get back on your feet, and you don't have the benefit of a second income in the household typically. In order to help you make ends meet, you may or may not be in a position to borrow from family, which generally speaking, you probably don't want to do anyway because then you owe somebody. So this is something to be taken, that if you're a single individual or a single earner household, you ultimately want to save and provide more of a buffer in case you or the breadwinner of the household is actually going to be out of work for a while and not earning, or maybe taking a survival job and not earning as much while they look for work. As I had said earlier, 56% of American households don't have $1,000 set aside to be able to cover an emergency. So they have another statistic a little bit over that, have less than $600 in order to be able to cover an emergency. They couldn't cover it with the liquid funds on hand, which is not really where you want to be. In that particular regard, it's just even more essential that you find a way to save the money and find a way to protect that money for true emergency. Having said that, it states over here in Bankrate that over half of Americans don't have enough for 3 months of expenses. So that doesn't surprise me, considering 56% don't have enough for $1,000. Be aware and try not to be in that category, or try to get out of it absolutely as quickly as possible. So what if you're digging your way out of debt and putting aside an emergency fund, say, of just that basic $1,000, you'd rather put it towards the debt because you're getting negative interest. That is the interest, say you're paying a credit card. Well, then again, what if you lose a week or two worth of work, you miss a paycheck, whatever, and then you don't have enough in the meantime to cover yourself for a week or two, and you miss a payment and you just don't have the cash on hand? Well, that is one of the big problems with not having that minimal amount of money to cover something that can't be deferred, like a regular monthly minimum payment on a card. So you do want that $1,000, and then wisdom would suggest that you go ahead and then focus on paying down the debt on higher interest cards. There is a money or a debt snowball, and they have a debt avalanche. The two of them I'll probably talk about in a different installment of this, but just to give you a bird's eye view of it, a debt avalanche is where you don't pay any attention to how big or small the debt is. You just pay off the one with the highest interest rate first. However, the debt snowball tends to work a lot better for people, and that is you pay off the smallest debt first and then take the money that you saved once you paid that off as far as your requirement for monthly payments, and then go ahead and apply that or a portion of it to add into paying off the next debt, the next largest debt, the next largest debt. And that definitely has some advantages. Because of the psychological reward for saving or putting the money in and then saving on the interest and saving that payment every month. Some people may want to, again, because they know themselves, they might want to take half of the payment they saved and add that back into their monthly budget to be able to give themselves some breathing room, which I don't believe there's anything wrong with that, especially if you're really close to the bone. And then the other half would, of course, go to the next largest debt and paying that down quicker. There are benefits to both. Of course, the more you can pay off, especially if it's an 18, 20, 30% credit card, say if it's in default, 29.99, it's 30%. What can I say, folks? Now, during the pandemic, we had a lot of stuff as far as money flying around. We had various stimulus payments, and there are approximately 17% of Americans in this situation where they actually socked away more cash and more savings during the pandemic, which is a fantastic position to be in. But not everybody was so lucky. Now, we've talked about what an emergency fund is, as far as the fact that it is something that is liquid or highly liquid and immediately accessible in case of an emergency. Now, what's not an emergency fund? Well, for starters, your retirement account, your 401k at work, your IRA, your Roth IRA, those aren't emergency funds. Those are for retirement. You don't want to be taking money out of your retirement accounts for emergencies, in that they're actually going to be taxable events. And so the reality is, not only will you take the money out, but you're going to have to provide 20 or even 30% of the money for federal purposes for not only the income tax, but you're also going to have a 10% slap on the hand in the form of an excise tax for taking it out early in most cases. There are a few exceptions, and you need to talk to your tax advisor about that. But I would suggest that you definitely take a hard look at if you're in a position where you need emergency capital and you just don't have it, and you're looking at your retirement as the only way to do it. If it's a 401k, 403b, many times your employer has a provision for loans. Now, the good news for those is that you're paying yourself interest, number one. Number two, you're actually going to be in a position where it's a non-taxable event. The proceeds from loans are not taxable events. So this is a good and smart way to take the money out, but you have to be currently employed. If you lose your job and you have an outstanding loan, however, then one of two things has to happen. You either pay back the amount that you owe to your retirement plan, or if you don't do it within a certain amount of time, 90 days usually, then you actually have to pay tax on that in the form of a 1099. However, you do avoid the excise tax in most cases, that 10% bump that the government likes to punish you with for taking the money out. Another thing that's not an emergency fund would be a payday loan, which they have effective interest rates that are in some cases in the hundreds of percent. So that's if it's amortized annually, because usually you have a short payback period and it will be 30 some odd percent or pretty close to it, or a flat amount of money, and it works out to be a huge amount when you annualize it. That is, if you actually looked at it as far as taking it out or renewing it for a full year, you are just burying yourself. Another item that some people do is they go to these places that actually do title loans on your car. A little bit more reasonable, but still, you've just jeopardized your car and you've got a problem. I would also be wary of that because it's a secured debt. And you could lose your vehicle if you stop making the payments. So you're warned, and now you're hopefully a little bit wiser. I'm going to link an article below from Investopedia, and Investopedia mentions, and I believe it was through some research that they did, that they found that there are 3 companies that actually provide a supplement to your retirement account by linking, if you link your retirement account in one instance to the company's plan website, then any money you put in, they'll match up to $250. I believe that's Levi Strauss. And there's another one that is Truist Financial Corp, and they'll actually give you a $750 contribution to your savings account if you complete a financial wellness course once you start working for the company, which is a pretty good deal. Prudential Financial also has a small program. It's pretty modest, surprisingly, but anything that employers could do to foster your savings would be great. ESOP account or something that you can avail yourself of if you have some money to spare to set aside. However, if you take the money out, then yes, you may have you're going to have a taxable event in all but a few cases, and you're going to have tax liability. So always factor in if something is taxable or potentially taxable or not, so that you can make a wiser decision about what to take, how much, and from where, and how much you really need to take if you've got to take a tax hit. So for now, I'm going to wrap this up, and I want to thank you. So signing off for Money Clips, this is Keith. Please hit like, subscribe, or hit the notification bell if you found this to be of any use to you at all. If it's just nothing but a healthy reminder to you, then great. I don't think anybody can say this enough, especially for the 56% of people that can't come up with $1,000 to cover an emergency. All right, take care.